Hey folks, welcome to CTF Radio. I'm Adam D, and I have, as always, Zardus with me. You want to say hi
Hey,
again?
everybody.
And so today we have a super interesting episode for you today. So this is going to be the first episode where we're expanding beyond DEF CON and Order of the Overflow, and we're talking to other CTF organizers. So who do we have? What's the CTF that we're going to be talking about today, Jan?
So today's a very special CTF, one of the kind of awesome events of the year. It's Google CTF. And we're talking with one of the lead organizers of Google CTF, Eduardo.
So awesome. So on that note, Eduardo, why don't you come in and let's clap for him, Jan? Always nice to have cool people here. So thanks for being here, Eduardo. We really appreciate you taking the time out of your busy job at Google to talk to us here about Google CTF. But before we get into that, maybe we can know a little bit more about you and your background. So how did you get into CTFs?
So thanks for inviting me. I think I'm really happy to get a chance to talk about all these works from like a lot of people, as we'll probably talk about later. And yeah, so I got started maybe 10 years ago or so in the CISO CTF from Dan. And yeah.
And you were organizing or playing?
No, playing. I was one of the. We won, but the
Congrats.
yeah, but the I stopped playing for a while, mostly because it was like a one-off team. It wasn't like established team or anything. And yeah, I freelanced, so to speak, between teams.
Freelance player. That's interesting. Like LeBron. Like, which team am I going to take my talents to next?
Well, it's mostly like whoever invites me in a day that I have time, and it worked out. So most recently, I've been playing with ESPR. But yeah, anyway, so it started as I don't know, people just playing for fun and asking me if I have time on the weekends, and sometimes I did, sometimes I didn't, and whenever I did, it's fun. Mostly at the beginning, I wasn't super excited about them because I felt they were maybe too easy. Like not in that way, but it was like artificially making problems easier than it is in real life. Like right, something that will like the fact that you know that there's a problem gets you so much ahead of the game, and and yeah, I felt like that was kind of weird. And my background was mostly about bug hunting, so finding bugs in like real bugs in companies and things like that. So
yeah, and they might not be there.
Yeah, and I mean, there's always bugs, but you don't know.
yeah.
And you don't know that if it was placed there intelligently by a person that wants you to find it, right?
Yeah.
So actually, maybe you'll talk about design philosophy and so forth later, but in our years of organizing ICTF, Adam and I and the rest of the kind of ICTF team often brainstorm like, what about having invulnerable services where some services are invulnerable, and in the end, it was always deemed to be a terrible idea in terms of game design. So a CTF is definitely something very different in that regard.
Yeah, I think one of the things that well, that was at the beginning, right? So nowadays I think about this slightly different. Like I don't I now I like it, but at the beginning I wasn't so excited. And one of the things that we notice is that people find issues that we didn't expect, and that is essentially the same as real security research. And what the insight here, I guess, or one way of thinking about it, is that actually it's not that different from real security research, given that so many people find unintended issues that are easier than the issues that we planted on purpose. And the reason is just that it's so hard to build secure software that building insecure software that is only insecure in one way is even, well, it's at the very least as hard, but in practice is harder just because
you have the same problem, right? At least in one hand, it's nice because you're not building production software that has to work across everyone's browser and IE6 or whatever.
but the problem is that you still have, so the it's only 48 hours, and when it doesn't work for 1 hour, like if your downtime is 1 hour for a year, then that's okay. If your downtime is 1 hour, 1 hour before the CTF ends or whatever, that's everybody's gonna hate you for it, and you ruin an otherwise fun experience and make everyone hate you all of a sudden, like in like 1 hour, it goes from that to that. So yeah, that I like it now, but I remember at the beginning I thought that was one of the weird things about it. And I ran a war game for a long time as well. And
Uh-huh.
the war game I think was very similar to a CTF in the sense that it's also planted vulnerabilities and so on.
Right.
But it was mostly for educational purposes. So I felt like that was different in the sense like, okay, I want to teach people things, and yeah, this is how they learn. But the CTFs are way more competitive. They are not just about like learning, but are also in some way or form like sports. So then it's not just
Exactly.
like about teaching people how to run. It's about seeing who is the fastest or who is the strongest and whatnot. And that
Right, which is a very different approach. And that actually can maybe something we can touch on in terms of organizing a CTF, right? It's like, what is the point? Like you mentioned Seesaw or Pico CTF or other good ones that are more geared towards, especially Seesaw, like the undergrad competition, right? It's geared more towards people who are new to CTFs and not experts, whereas something on the other end of the spectrum, Google CTF or DEF CON CTF, right? Our goal is to exactly see who runs the fastest, right? And so like not everybody gets to play in the Olympics, right? Just because you can run.
I will say that Seesaw oftentimes, even though it's open to everyone, oftentimes the undergrad teams actually win, right? It might be a different amount of effort put in or something along those lines, but it's hard to write them out. Like this last weekend, as of recording time in September 2020, Seesaw just finished yesterday, and an undergrad team beat out the rest of the world.
nice. Yeah, so it happened in one of the Chinese CTFs. It's called WCTF, maybe last year.
Mm-hmm.
And there was a challenge that we made. In WCTF, every team brings a challenge, brings two challenges, and
Cool.
we not that there were some challenges that nobody from the top teams had solved, but the high, well, not the high, the student CTFs, the student players were already solving those tasks. So there were some tasks where and the problem with WCTF is that all the challenges are unreasonable. Well, not all the challenges, but most of the challenges are unreasonable because you bring the challenges, right? So you don't want people to solve your challenge because otherwise they get the points and you don't. So so they are all very hard. It's all the challenges are super hard. There's only like there's anyway, it doesn't matter. So the point is that the fact that some student teams were able to solve some challenges that the top teams were not able to solve kind of shows that at least even though they were not at the same scores, they had some skill set that definitely.
Yeah, that's great. So maybe let's wind the clock back a little bit. So your first, CTF was Seesaw 2010-ish.
28.
Where were you kind of in your career? So this is your first time, playing in a CTF. Were you in school? Were you still learning? Were you an established kind of security person? Kind of where were you in that aspect?
Well, I definitely was studying because I think we needed to be students to be able to participate.
Okay, so this was the undergrad. You played
I
the
don't
undergrad.
I don't
Nice.
actually remember the dates, but it was 28, so it probably was around that time. I haven't. I think I was working maybe as a contractor for High Five, a social network, but I was studying as well.
Okay.
Yeah, and my teammates were one from Australia, the other one from the US, and so on. So it was kind of like an international team.
Awesome.
Yeah, and
That's cool.
yeah, after that, then maybe in 2029, I already was. I was already working full time. I didn't finish university, so I kind of skipped a few things. But then and I've been in Google for 10 years, so you make the
Oh, cool. Awesome.
So you had a non-traditional track into the security industry. More through applied hands-on knowledge than through like a formal education.
Yeah, but most of at the time, there's multiple people in my team with the same kind of path, so it's kind of normal, at least for.
Okay.
I mean,
cool.
It's maybe not super normal, but.
Oh no, that's awesome. Don't think that because we're, professors in the academy that we, judge or look down on that. I think that's totally awesome. And I think that, like you said, there's many different paths into, information security or whatever you want to call cybersecurity in the industry. And I think that's great that there are those paths, right? Like you shouldn't be, and that's actually one of the things that Jan likes to talk about is that, these skills, the only thing stopping you from going and learning this is your own self. You can go out, there's so many resources and everything that you can go out and learn with the war games that you mentioned or other types of things, right? That you shouldn't feel that you're being held back because you don't have this formal education.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I'm super grateful for the community, the fact that there's so much content online, and like the freedom of knowledge, and always sharing stuff, and the things that always frustrated me the most about like Mozilla not open sourcing the exploits always frustrated me the most, because I wanted to learn how to do this, and all of them were like restricted. Like those of like the fact that most of the community is very open was mainly the reason that a lot of us like didn't need like formal education to get
Yeah,
there.
no, I think that's great. I mean, that's a beautiful point, and that's, I think, speaks to the hacker ethos, right? Is like we want to share information. I mean, that's what actually as academics we also love, right? We want to share as much as we can the tools, the data sets that we're building, because it's good for everyone if you can, start from build on the shoulders of giants. I think that's great.
Yeah.
Cool. So then maybe we can focus a little bit now onto Google CTF. So can you tell us a little bit about the history behind it? Like, how was it created? Who was who was and is involved, and how long has Google CTF been around?
Yeah. So
Not all at once.
Not
like no. So the CTF was started by Andrew. He is not in Google anymore, but he was supposed to run it on 2015. But he was building most of the challenges himself, so it took until
Oof.
2016 to be able to launch it. Um, so that yeah, so he started it, and it ran. And one of the interesting things that happened was that we accidentally leaked all the challenges 2 weeks before the CTF started. So
Oh no.
yeah, it was kind of weird. So unfortunately, we had to. Well, I was not involved yet, so the team had to build challenges within 2 weeks, right? So that created two things all of a sudden. One, suddenly there was a bigger team of people helping, and two, it attracted a lot of attention, because when we leaked the challenges, we posted them as teaser, so people could play them. Because yeah, they were the cat was out of the bag, so we might as well do something with the challenges.
Right.
So yeah, so everybody got very excited about it because the challenges were good, and then they played. And then the next year, given that it was so much effort for one person, or it was a small team, it wasn't just one person, it was maybe 5 people at most, to write the challenges as part of as a 20% project. In Google, we have this thing called
Right.
20%.
Right.
Then one of my reports, I'm the manager of a few people in the team, and was thinking about how to take it from there. So part of my job as their manager was like, okay, so how can we make this like, it's not a business case, but something like that. And at the end, I ended up talking to like all the leads in the team and so on. And then we were trying to figure out like, okay, so if we are going to do this as a team, like as adopted as part of our team is like 100 people or so. It's like the vulnerability section of the security team. And if we were going to do this, we had to do it like really well. Like we thought it had to be like worthy of putting Google's name on it or something like that. So that led us into a path of over exhaustion of resources, which we as we can talk about it later, but we had to fix several times, leading to the point where we are now. But yeah, I think quality and difficulty, like making it so that it was good for the top teams, and also good for beginners, and also lots of testing, like or the quality had to be good, and figure out how we do the testing properly, how to do quality control properly, and so on. How to design of the challenges, because we didn't know. So all of the team is comes, not all of the team, but most of the team comes from experienced CTF teams. So either like from PPP, from Dragon Sector, from ESPR, from Intrepids, from 217, and so on. So there is the expertise there already. The point was like, okay, so we can do one. So how do we do like a really good one? And yeah, that I don't know how much we're still learning every year. And being inside,
I think everyone is.
Being inside.
You've also just given me anxiety and nightmares when you said that the challenges were leaked two weeks beforehand. I got flashbacks of like how insane I would feel if that happened in any of our CTFs. Like, oh, whew.
So But what you bring up about balancing for beginners and absolute top of their the CTF world type players, something that is very 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 hard. It's something that we actually almost explicitly ignore for DEF CON,
Mm-hmm.
right? When we approach DEF CON, we often think, okay, this is kind of an event for top hackers, and if you're just learning, I'm sorry, you can of course try to approach this, but
and you should. That's, I think, the other thing is we say you should try these things, but yeah, from a resource perspective, right? It's like when we have to devote our resources to something, we should, devote as much time as possible to make the best challenges that will, like you said, the obstacle course that is correctly going to determine who's, the best hackers, right?
Yeah. So I think the approaches that we took for that, well, there's every year, as I said, we learn new things. But the first year that the new team, so not Andrew and I
not
think
just one person.
No, it was not just Andrew. It was Niru probably, and Andrew, and I shouldn't. Anyway, so when they organized it, I think it was one like we learned some of things from the postmortem. So every year we do this postmortem, but most of the learnings came from just experience of doing it year after year. And so the first year we didn't have a beginners anything beginners related. It was just top teams, top difficulty. And one of the problems was that because we made a Google blog post, we got lots of interest from like students and so on. So they didn't like it too much. Like in CTF time, everyone was happy about it, but like the offline feedback we got was that people felt like they should stop looking into information security because they cannot solve. We had
yeah, that's a bummer.
Yeah, so it was like, okay, we don't want that. So what we did the second year was that we did something called the Beginner's Quest, in which we had the CTF happen at the same time as an unrelated competition. The second one was not a competition, an unrelated thing that we called the Beginner's Quest, and it was just like a war game with like easier challenges. People liked it, and they were not super easy. So we still had some people say like, oh my god, the Beginner's Quest, I cannot even solve one. But it was a lot better, right? So people were happy about it and so on. We did the same the second year. The second year we had more of a story. And this year so one of the things that happened last year is, so one of the things that we did for the Beginner's Quest is that as part of the story, we encouraged people to go to IRC and ask questions to a bot. But it wasn't a bot; it was us. So,
so that's amazing.
Yeah, and still people always confused whether it was a human or not. But they believed it sometimes, so it was great. So so part of it was like for one weekend, you have a chance to have like conversations with the security team, and they try to teach you about things for like just for 48 hours. Like we had this rotation. And one of the things that we noticed was that there were people solving the Beginner's Quest on streams. And it wasn't a competition, like who was the fastest or whatever, but there were multiple streams going at the time. And it was very interesting to see them how they solved the challenges. Also, there's like lots of YouTube videos of people solving the challenges in the Beginner's Quest and so on. And because they are more accessible, it lend themselves to that. So what we were thinking for this year was that maybe we can do something like that. Like, I don't know if you know Pony Racing from Tattoo. So doing a speed run where we have commentators as well, trying to go through the process of solving like speedrun challenge, like essentially pony racing, but not just pony racing. And so that's what we're trying this year. So this year we had one challenge per category that was easy, and for the normal Google CTF, and we're doing for the top 16 teams speedrun that is also targeted for beginners in some way or form, where we have the commentators explaining like why this works this way, or how to do this or how to do that, and so on. So the idea is to try to do something that is more accessible to beginners, even if they aren't immediately able to solve the challenges on the Beginner's Quest or whatnot. They can still follow through something without them getting disappointed that it's too hard for me or something like that.
Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. And I think seeing, I think that's a great approach to try to like see the tools and techniques that people are using, right?
Yeah.
I think that's the other thing as a beginner, you often don't even know, maybe you're approaching things, but you're using object dump and strings, which can get you decently far, right, at the start. But as you get, slightly more advanced challenges, you probably need to, pro up your tooling a little bit just to make it slightly easier. And that, I think, seeing those environments and seeing how people, one of the stories I like is we also did speed runs for DEF CON 27 quals, and that was insane seeing people pop a buffer overflow in like 5 minutes or 4 minutes. And then we asked the top team, and it was, I'll link their name in their Twitter handle in the show notes, but they were, is a 17-year-old kid in Korea who just is very,
Korean
very
badass,
exactly. So
nice.
that's very cool.
I remember that DEF CON quals. I had one of my teammates. He wasn't doing it for the points, because I think the points like dumped super quickly.
Yeah, they dropped off very quickly.
But he was having so much fun that he spent the whole time doing that.
Yeah.
That was cool. Yeah. So like, actually, that's a good example of, I think, that resource allocation thing. Like I did all 12 of those speedrun challenges and nothing else that entire CTF, right? So, that was the only thing I was doing, was making these easy beginner style challenges when I could have been making, more difficult, at least one, maybe two difficult challenges. So yeah, it's a weird resource problem that you need to do this stuff.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's very tricky. I think actually, just to add one thing to the tooling question, I think a lot of the time it's not necessarily individual tools, but whole paradigms that beginners miss. So a beginner might approach every single reversing problem with GDB, right? And so a dynamic reversing tool rather than a static reversing tool, or vice versa. Right, might not realize that, hey, actually, if you run this, we don't have to understand like every single instruction here. Getting that, like conveying that to a initiate into security is actually very surprisingly tricky.
Oh, and I think the other thing about that, Jan, is also like mindset as you're approaching things, right? Especially something like reverse engineering. I know I've fallen victim of playing, I think it was probably either DD Tech or probably a DD Tech year, where I was reversing a binary and just like in IDA, got super deep into functions trying to figure out what they were. Yeah. And after like 12 hours or something, I finally realized like, oh, this is the stupid backdoor functionality that the organizers put in to check the health of the service. It has nothing to do with the rest of it. So if I had gotten better about being able to like kind of look a little bit and then say like, I'm going to pop back up the stack and like continue exploring, right? I think that's something that people develop with time. And it wasn't, I'm a web guy, so me reversing binary is like all I would do in DEF CON. But DEF CON finals was struggle.
Yeah, the concepts apply in web and crypto. When I first started in on crypto challenges, I would go down these insane tangents, like, all right, let's break whatever discrete logarithm, let's solve this. It was the wrong route to take, whereas there is a right route of understanding the bigger picture and understanding where the flaws are.
Yeah, one thing that you were talking about reverse engineering and being a web guy, I think nowadays web is a lot of reverse engineering, especially as more of the code gets moved to the client, and a lot of the code is compiled to JavaScript from like random languages, and as soon as you start compiling things to support all browsers, you start implementing features in JavaScript that are not there before. So the code, there are no reverse engineering tools that are as good as IDA or well, maybe Jira or so, but for web reverse engineering. So some of the things that you like, I don't know, I think reverse engineering skills for web security research are going to be more important as we go through and we get more of those languages that aren't just JavaScript, but things that compile down. So yeah, I think it's still possible. At least.
Yeah, especially I think it's a great point, especially in CTFs, right? So either if it's a JavaScript challenge, right, you'll have the source, or often I think some of the best web challenges are the ones that just give you the source off the bat, right? Because it's not like you're still reverse engineering when it's a black box challenge, right? You're trying to understand from the outside how this remote service works. When you have the code, especially like I still think of and remember a lot of Orange's challenges where just be like, here's 6 lines of PHP. You're like, I understand every line in this code and I cannot find the bug, but one does exist. So
Yeah, it's great. I really like Orange challenges. Yeah.
awesome. Cool. So then for preparing for this year for Google CTF, we obviously had kind of crazy COVID challenges. So how did that change the way you approached Google 2020 or Google CTF 2020? I don't know how you prefer to say that.
It made it easier
Yeah.
because the hardest thing that we were going to have to do was to explain why this year we were going to have one event rather than two, and we didn't have to explain it. And
one as in just the CTF rather than a qualifier and a final event.
Yeah, something like that.
Is that what you mean?
So sometime in January, before we knew that COVID was going to be a big deal, it was end of January, so we heard it about it in the news, right? But it wasn't like
right.
It was like a small thing.
It hadn't impacted yet.
Yeah, it sounded as bad as SARS, like the first SARS, which still was serious, but it didn't sound like it was going to be like a global pandemic type of problem. So we decided at that point that we were going to have only one event. We still didn't know the details about it, if it was going to be on-site or online or both at the same time or whatever. So the question was, okay, so if it's going to be on-site, we need to select which teams to invite. And if it's going to be online, then we have to figure out like, okay, but we want to have an on-site, so maybe next year we do on-site and not this year. And as the meetings went through, the reality of we're not going to have an on-site event became clear. So it's like, okay, so we don't need a finals. So then we're only going to have one event. So in retrospect, that was the thing I was most concerned about, is like, okay, so how do we like present this without it being like weird? Because we wanted to have a way to select the teams to invite, and it was difficult for us to select them. And we didn't have to. So now next year we know who we will invite, but we don't have to do it through, I don't know, weird selection processes where we had like a weird spreadsheet with like a bunch of points depending on a bunch of random things. That this seemed a lot fairer. And for DEF CON, you guys have something similar with like the qualifying other CTFs that helped you get into the DEF CON. So we were thinking about doing maybe something similar, but then we need to find which ones. And it was.
It is tricky, right? You have to and you have to deal with a lot of people will email like, hey, can you consider my CTF, right? But maybe you've already made all the decisions, or maybe it's kind of a
you don't want to have people know. You don't want to have so much that nobody plays quals, right? You need to like balance it between. And also, what did we learn our first year about the number of teams that qualify for finals, Jan? Do you remember?
When it's like 24 teams. Yeah, that was way too many.
Yeah, why was it too many? There were many reasons. You remember?
There's many reasons. One of them is just capacity at finals.
Yeah, right? Physical space. That's something we didn't really think of when our very first year. We just thought like 24 teams would be great, and then
what could go wrong?
Yeah, we tell DEF CON 24 teams, and they're like, what? It's never been this large, and the room we have you in is not that big. So
there was some last minute shuffling, and I mean it just goes in an in-person event. One of our big challenges is the fire marshal, right? Because the fire marshal wants to make sure that if there's a fire, people don't just like die in the room. And if there are 300 people in the room or whatever, then the bad things will happen. Could happen.
Yeah. So, and then running cables, like the number of teams for an attack defense final, like significantly increases the complexity of your, infrastructure. And then you have to host all these teams and their services.
But probably Google has is a better place to host a final event than a random Las Vegas
hotel room
ballroom,
or hotel ballroom.
You have to,
I don't know,
tape down all the cables and stuff. You probably have ports in the floors or something along these lines.
So both. We tape things on the, cables on the floor for sure, but we also have production spaces in some of our events for sales and things like that. But no, I think event spaces like a DEF CON hotel, like a Black Hat hotel, like a Vegas hotel, I think are very similar to the ones we end up having. And sometimes even for 10 teams, we invite 10 teams. We would like to have more space. like
Yeah.
it doesn't sound like a lot, but 10 teams already occupies a lot of space within our
Yes.
larger event spaces in Google. So I don't want I will love that to have had the Google CTF this year already, so that I could tell you where we will. Oh, I can tell you where we'll have it because we will not have it anymore. So we were going to rent.
Perfect.
So we were going to rent a bunker. It's not really a bunker, but it was like a storage space underground in Switzerland,
Okay.
and it's gone. Someone else needed it for constructing someone there, but it was like this huge
No.
underground vault that the hardest problem was that it was going to be way too cold because there's no air conditioning inside of it.
Wow.
So we were thinking
That's what the computers are for.
Yeah.
so we
Heaters.
no, it's huge. It's like I don't remember, but super tall. And the problem was that, okay, so how do we make sure that the players don't like I don't know, get too cold? So we were thinking of giving them
Hmm.
hoodies or a hat, which yeah, we were sure that was going to be the coolest CTF ever, but not for that. But anyway, at
Yeah,
the end we
like
couldn't make it happen.
uh so it didn't, if do I
Bummer.
remember correctly, that at one point Google was either doing or thinking about putting servers on barges and like
I heard
running
about that.
them
Yeah.
in the water based on the motion of the ocean would also go, yeah, just put the CTF players on a barge. I think that would be a great place
What
to
could go wrong?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I remember that it was a long time ago, but yeah, I was living in the
Yeah.
U.S. at the time, and yeah, there were a lot of rumors about it, and uh, there was one barge, there was one of them somewhere in the Bay Area, and everyone was talking about it,
Hmm.
and what is it
Yeah, I
for and
remember.
why, and
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah,
Cool. So then how did the Google CTF 2020 experience go? So like in your estimation, so
yeah.
it was
So
48 hours, right? And
it was 47 hours, 59 minutes, and 59
47.
seconds.
Ooh,
Nice.
exactly.
So you started 1 second late,
Yeah, one
or
second.
you ended 1 second early.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh, actually, no. Yes, 58 seconds. Sorry, we start 1 second late and we finish 1 second early, and the reason was because it confused people to figure out the time zones. So we figured this was easier to say
Yeah.
this is the day it starts because like otherwise I don't know if it's the day before or whatever. So anyway,
Right.
the I think being inside is harder because you know all of the things that went wrong, um,
Hmm.
which is not the case when you are on the outside. When you're on the outside, you only see if you are the unlucky person that got
Yeah.
the 500 error.
You
Then
only see things that went really wrong.
yeah, exactly, yeah. So yeah, from our perspective, like okay, so we had like several challenges with intended solutions. We had some issues with infrastructure scaling. We had a problem with the scoreboard where like in Firefox certain challenges were not visible in the UI because of some CSS problems.
Oh.
So it was like
Oh.
lots of little issues, right? And we had this war room where like here we had a video call and we all
Hmm.
like were discussing all these problems. So I think the second day was very quiet, but the first day it was like problems every 5 minutes. Like oh, like there are servers spiking on this thing. We need to add more things, or
Yeah.
someone find a problem with this challenge. How did they solve it? Because we thought this was not possible.
How did they solve it so fast? That's a common one. That we
And
see,
we're like,
yeah.
this should have taken them 2 days or a day and a half.
Yeah, that definitely happened. And then the most heated discussions here how to fix the challenge because
Right.
we don't want
Yeah.
to fix the
Yes.
challenge and make it
Beautiful.
unfair for them, but we also want
Yes.
to not provide like a guessy experience to players,
Yes.
so that
Right.
like yeah, all of these discussions of being like okay, so ideally we will not change anything, and then um, but we want to change something because otherwise it sucks for everyone. So how do
Right.
we find a compromise somehow? And eventually, I think we did okay decisions on the issues that we had to do, but internally, like everything was like ah. So yeah, I mean, I don't know if this is the case for everyone, but it definitely is very interesting to have all these discussions of like, so what do we do now, and
Right.
balancing all these different things. And then at the end, sometimes what we do is we just ask the players that will be affected. Like sometimes we have to undo points or whatever, right? So then,
Hmm.
yeah. So it's interesting.
Do you go what we've always done in the past, which might not be an ideal solution, and there's definitely problems with it, is we would release like a second challenge with whatever issue fixed. Now this had problems. The first challenge might be left too guessy, or the various other drawbacks to that approach.
I mean, one drawback, right, that's clear is like, well, but if you did solve the first one in an intended way, it basically almost doubles your points, right? So now that challenge and that bug is essentially worth double the points.
It also makes the first challenge easier because the players can diff the two.
So exactly. Especially if it's a binary or something like that.
Or
that becomes.
So we had this problem in one of the tasks, and we had this in two of the tasks. So one of them we released a second challenge that didn't give points. So
that was very cool.
Just so people.
That's actually the first I've seen of that. Did you guys come up with that yourself, or is that something you drew from your past experiences?
It was Jan Gora, one of our the author of the challenge. Really didn't want to because he spent so much time finding this bug, right, that he wanted to present to the world. So yeah.
Can you talk about the bug?
Yeah. So it was a web challenge. It's called All the Little Things, and the name is a hint, so it's all the little things, and it's supposed to be the trick. So it's a web challenge. So the idea is that there is one property in JavaScript in the DOM that when you check for its existence, it returns false. When you try to assign something to it, it doesn't throw, but it doesn't.
I worked on that challenge. That's why I'm thinking of this. I didn't read the write-ups of the actual intended solutions. This is amazing. Please,
and so when you assign something to it, it doesn't work, and it also is clobberable with. It's not clobberable, but like if you assign something to it, it references the global namespace. And the solution, the intended solution, was to use document.all, which is the property that does this. And the reason that browsers implement it in this weird way is because of backwards compatibility with Internet Explorer, 5, 6, I don't know.
Amazing.
Yeah, so it's like this weird, impossible to replicate behavior in JavaScript, but that, it essentially allowed for a specific type of bug that otherwise wasn't possible to implement. One thing that we found out, unfortunately, is that one of the other parts of the chain of the bug allowed to bypass that step completely. Yeah. So so people could still solve the challenge in a cool and interesting way. It's just not as cool as he wanted it to be.
Right.
So so then the idea was, okay, so we can just release a second step, but we didn't want to add hints, because if we added a hint, it wasn't fair to the teams that had solved it already, but we still wanted to present the idea. So and the idea came up, and then it was okay.
So that's amazing. Yeah. So this is, I think, a couple of great things. It's really good as organizers to understand that other people also feel like their hair is on fire when they're organizing and running a CTF, even if it appears from the outside. Yeah, but I think there's a very interesting thing that happens when you're organizing, is like sometimes it's like peak insanity when you're trying to deal with some issue, and then followed by 2 hours of boredom because like nothing is happening and you're just watching logs waiting for something to happen, right? So I think that's a great thing that hopefully as we get more and more other organizers on here, we'll see that this is a common theme, so that maybe people shouldn't be so afraid of that things will be on fire. Like you said, you're throwing code at a ton of hackers, and they're going to find all kinds of unintended.
I mean, on this concept, there is a live stream somewhere, an archived live stream of another CTF, and unfortunately I don't remember the name.
I can't remember the name. I'll try to find it as you talk.
And they did this incredible job under insane pressure, where live on stream they found out that someone had leaked all flags, compromised their scoreboard instance, I think, or they had some unsafe mount somewhere, where from a challenge you could leak every flag. And this player talked to them, said, hey, I leaked every flag. And so you could see live on stream probably the worst case scenario of a CTF organizer, right? Which is, as a CTF organizer, the worst case scenario is someone, compromise your infrastructure to the point where they could break the game completely. It was
Naham Khan CTF.
I heard about it.
Yeah, and on stream,
not to throw shade on them. The point is to give them props for dealing with this and fixing things.
they ran through the CTF quite successfully, right? They talk to the way they think, the player for, and then they fix the problem, and the CTF completed successfully, right? So the other takeaway is things are gonna break, and it's not the end of the world.
And then the other thing I will say that your story reminded me of, Eduardo, is oftentimes the other thing that players don't realize is we like you said, you have to debate amongst yourselves what to do when these things happen, right? And so something that's lost, and something that I know we try to get better at over time, is like, especially when this happens the second day with like 8 hours left to go in the competition, it's like, oh, what do you do? Like, and this happened to us in DEF CON 28 quals. I developed a web challenge that I modeled around bugs that I found in Coursera's online grader, and I thought it was a really cool challenge. And then I released it, and they solved it insanely fast. And I dug into it, and I realized, like, oh god, my tests, because I wanted it to be a multi-step, and the first one was like a very basic SQL injection thing. And of course, I stupidly had the raw username passwords in the database, and so they stole the username password of the user that had solved it, which was my test script, making sure that everything was up and working, and were able to get the flag by just logging in as that user. And so, and this was, a silly mistake that was so stupid that I made, that I didn't even, I just didn't consider that, vector. I was like, oh, they'll have to do this and this. And then, then we had to make the decision at the time of like, okay, we've also said that we won't release any new challenges at this point in the CTF. But I think under duress, and now looking back, I probably wouldn't have done this, but we released a fixed version of the challenge and was like, oh, surprise, there's a brand new challenge, which I think, is a similar type of thing. Like, personally, I wanted this cool challenge with this cool bug that to be out there. But at the same time, I probably should have, now thinking that like, this is an option, I probably should have just released this as like a fixed no points challenge at that point. So it's something
another possibility is use it as a tiebreaker challenge, 1 point.
Oh, that's interesting.
Right.
Huh.
Where it still has an impact for the the top teams.
Yeah, that's interesting thought, Jan. So I think it's good to see that these type of discussions and things happen to to people organizing CTFs. And I don't think as a community we have a right answer, right? Because just like you said, Eduardo, we have a similar policy where once a challenge is solved, we try to give, 0 hints, nothing, because that's not fair to the team that solved it, right? Mm-hmm. Because maybe with that same hint, they could solve it 2 hours earlier and have that bandwidth to work on a new challenge, right? So as long as everyone can solve it under the same amount of information, that's, I think, what, the important thing is.
So I think the takeaway is CTFs catch on fire no matter how much you prepare.
That's probably what the F means on the CTF.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Fire. Amazing. Cool. So overall, how did you think about how Google CTF 2020 went? Were you, happy?
Yeah,
I was happy to play. I'll tell you, as a player, because I played those web challenges. This is the difficult thing with, having a full academic job and also organizing DEF CON CTF is like my time to play CTFs is quite limited. And so, but I did play Google CTF because it has a great reputation, and, I obviously want to try those challenges, and I got halfway-ish through all the little things. And so, that was amazing. I enjoyed playing those challenges.
Awesome. Yeah, so I think it went really well, but the problem is that, as I mentioned before, that we only saw all the problems. So I only went through like 2 of them, I think, in this call.
Exactly. Yep. There's tons. There's tons. Yeah,
there's several others. Yeah. So I think one of the things that is really cool is that we get to learn every year from our mistakes. So one of the things that will be even better will be if we had like a centralized repository or something like that of like postmortems or something like that, because like even feedback from players. Like I think Redford gives very pointed feedback to CTFs when he doesn't like them, I guess. But I think all of that, like being able to learn from previous organizers, like repositories in some way or form, will really be helpful, because there is no competition.
Right.
I mean, there is no real competition between CTF teams. Between CTF organizers. Yeah.
Yes.
So I think being able to organize ourselves better will be really good, and that's one of the reasons why I really like this idea of having this podcast and so on, because I think it's a way for us to communicate better. The Slack, the CTF organizer Slack, is also another very good way to do so, and I think generally the whole idea of having better like documentation, better guidelines, better resources, and so on for organizers will improve the community a lot. And and uh, starting to talk about all of the problems that went wrong and then analyzing them and sharing them with each other and why we didn't choose to do the 1 point
Right.
thing, or why did we choose to do this other thing instead, like what is the rationale, and maybe they are wrong, maybe we're wrong, but at the end of the day, it's not going to be like a life, well, maybe for some people, but it's usually not like a life-changing problem that you made a wrong call, but it can help every single CTF in the future, especially if it's collated and organized properly. So yeah. Anyway,
Yeah, no, that's a great point.
It's great. Thanks for doing this.
Oh yeah, for sure. And that's what we feel that as. I think it's also a sense of community, right? That we're all out there trying to organize CTFs. And like you said, we're doing this, we're not getting paid to do this. We're doing this because we love CTFs and we love this game. And so that's, I think, the important thing of how can we learn from each other to do better is really important.
Yeah, I think that's an important thing in organizing CTFs in general. All the CTFs that are big, I mean, technically speaking, right, as a Google 20% project, someone pays you for it, but there are a lot of easier things you could do with your 20% than run a,
and that are less stressful for 47 hours
CTF.
and 59 minutes. And
yeah. So, I mean, everyone does this out of the passion for cybersecurity and the passion for the community. So anything that kind of moves that community forward, the central repository of, in some sense, best practices, or the postmortems and panic situations and stuff would be good. I mean, other interesting ideas are that I've had are like, in some sense, an on-call crisis team on the organizer Slack, or a channel where you could say, hey guys, we're running this and this CTF. We just had this issue. Any advice, for new organizers?
I will love that as well. Like we even had this discussion on the, what is it called, on the League channel or whatever, where one of the problems is like, how are we more consistent with our decisions, or maybe not consistent, but at least more informed, or something like that.
Yeah.
And I think the main problem is that if the team is like the organizers, usually the organizers
Yes.
are also players.
Or they're all players too.
Yeah,
or
so
for the most part.
it's a bit awkward of a conflict of interest, but I mean, it's a good idea, and I would love to see how we can make it happen. Like if we have a commitment that I don't know, people that are on call don't play,
or only people that don't play are hop in that channel.
Right. Yeah.
Maybe experienced players who are kind of retired or something.
Yeah. For listeners that might be confused, we're talking about a Slack that I guess Cyphertext started. That's a person started for CTF organizers, kind of worldwide. Anyone that has organized CTFs can get an invite to that Slack. Just ping Cyphertext on Twitter and come in and hang out. There's a lot of interesting discussion that happens. Standardization, challenge design, challenge, scoring systems, all sorts of stuff.
So I think we're approaching the end here. So I'd like to, Eduardo, ask you maybe just, one of the things we like to do is to try to inspire kind of the next generation of hackers. Do you have any tips to those people who are just starting out on their, hacking or CTFing journey, like how they can, be successful and how can we be you is basically,
So, yeah, I was thinking about that because you shared some of the ideas of things to talk about, and that one probably is complicated. So one of the things that I think I will say is that not everyone in the community is as nice as these two guys. So I remember that when I was just starting, I was reading like tutorials and then how things work and so on. And then there was this one tutorial that was talking about like FTP, like using, it was like a long time ago. So just FTPing into random servers and then seeing what they have in their FTP server. And yeah. So one of the things that that wasn't in the tutorial or in the documentation or whatever was how to get the IP address of the person that you were connecting to, right? So it was just like, okay, so you have a domain name, so you just put the domain. But at the time it wasn't clear to me. I was just starting and I didn't know anything. So I joined this IRC channel and I was like, okay, so I was following this tutorial that I found on your website or on your communities,
Hmm.
like it was a PBS, I guess. And and I asked, so, but one thing that is not mentioned anywhere in this tutorial that is obviously for beginners is how to get the IP address of your victim. So how do you get the IP address of the victim? And everyone responded with XDDDDDD. And I was like, shit, I don't know what is XDDDDD. I must Google what is XDDDDD. So I Googled it and I couldn't find out what XDDDD was. And it took me maybe months to find out that it was just people laughing at me. But the yeah, I guess what I'm trying to say is that not giving up, and not everyone is not nice. A lot of people are very nice and are willing there to help, and yeah, and CTFs are a good way to start because some of them are for beginners, so you are able to just go by your own pace, and you can read instructions online about how other people solve similar challenges. Same for war games and so on,
Yeah.
and yeah, not getting discouraged by the people that aren't super welcoming, but it's yeah it's hard, but once you get past that initial time of awkwardness, then everyone is super nice. But the like yeah, it is not always possible to do so, and yeah, don't give up. I think that's
Amazing. I think that's great. Go on.
The people that are not nice are, for example, there are certain people even on this call that might, under extreme pressure, be not nice on IRC.
I thought you were blaming me, but yes, we
No,
understand.
no, I've been not nice on IRC during a CTF when everything's melting down, and but afterwards, I'd say this sort of advice to reach out and don't be afraid of people, but keep in mind, it might just be on a Tuesday is better to email them than on or ask on IRC than on Saturday night when everything is down and the CTF's on fire.
Sure. All right. Great point. Cool. Well, thanks so much, Eduardo. We really enjoyed having you here. Do you have anything you want to plug? I know you're on Twitter at, is it sirdarckcat?
Yeah.
Is that how you pronounce that? Awesome. And I'll, of course, link in the show notes and everything to you. Is there anything you want to plug that people should check out?
I wish I had thought about
Are you
it before.
hiring maybe?
Yeah, but I think you will not find the position online because the way that our thing works is complicated. But yeah, no. So oof, I'm in the spot now. Donate to save the whales or something. I don't know.
Perfect. There we go. Awesome. No, that's great. That's great.
Hey,
cool.
Thank you for coming on.
Yeah, for sure. This was amazing. I think it was a great, conversation, and we didn't start out with the goal of necessarily realizing that all CTF organizers are essentially have similar experiences, but I think that's a great place to land on for that people to understand. So, thanks for joining us today, everyone. I'm Adam D. You can find me on Twitter at Adam Dupay. He's Zardus. You can find him on Twitter at Zardus. Together, we are CTF Radio, and you can find us online at YouTube and Twitter at CTF Radio with 3 O's. You can send questions to us through email at ctfradio@gmail.com. And who knows, we may use one of your questions on an upcoming episode of CTF Radio. Take care and happy hacking.
Bye-bye.